All right, hi folks, welcome back to PagerDuty Livestream. We're here for the final release notes of the year with Forrest and Jake. Forrest, dressed for the occasion. Happy holidays,
It did.
everybody.
If you're watching this later, you can probably guess what month it is.
Right?
And I don't have to explain my hat this time.
No. Yes, we have the full context of the hat just for this one stream. That's great. Awesome. Yeah, so we're here to talk about the 5.8.0 release notes. Fuji Green Knight on this one. At least it's all words I can pronounce this time, which is great.
Fuji, ironically, it did come out green, to match with the thing, but that is a randomly generated and picked out of our mountain name, our color, and our. I think the knight is typically that third one is like an icon type of. Icon.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Although maybe I'll figure out how to put the icon instead of just the word. What are we talking about? Well, let's look at the release notes, and we'll show you. This release, this 5.8.0 release, was all about Kubernetes. Not all about. I'll skip over that part because I'm pretty sure that Jake has wonderful things to show us about all of that later. We also spent some time, as usual, addressing a variety of CVEs out there. I thought I would take a hot second for any, self-hosted customers that decide to, maybe scan the product, check it out. It's a pretty common practice across, many businesses to just make sure that what the software is you're putting in there is safe and secure. We have our section of security advisories. Sometimes the CVEs that pop up might be false positives. Might be false positives in the sense of there's a vulnerability in a particular package, but we don't use it that way, right? And we'll go on record and put it in our docs that, hey, we actually don't use the product in that manner. There might be, others that I think in this list, there's others that we've issued in the past, etc. But you can always check out these security advisories if there's ever a question or you get a list back. Outside of that, if you are scanning the product, always scan the latest version. Every release has the potential to even inadvertently address a CVE that might be an older one, right? We might just naturally do some work on a particular part of the product and say, hey, we'll just bump this, version and maybe even preempt, the CVE might even have come out and we've already fixed it in a later version than you're scanning at that time. So yeah, always be, scanning the latest version. And we'll go back to the release notes and see what else might be here. The Secrets Manager plugin. This was not necessarily a bug, but I guess you could say we enhanced it. Because we don't want to be constantly just pulling the secrets out of the AWS Secret Manager plugin. When we originally built it, we specified a cache, and that cache was a little bit too long. So we added a configuration option to that plugin. You can now configure how long that cache stays. So if you have a very dynamic, AWS Secret Manager environment, maybe you want to tune that down a little bit lower. If it's fairly, static and particularly not getting updated outside of your Rundeck, ecosystem, then maybe you can, leave it long and leave it cached and local and a little bit more performant. But we leave that up to the customer now to configure that. It was not configurable before. A few customers ran into some trouble because they were getting or managing secrets outside of Rundeck and they hadn't quite made it to the cache. So a few jobs were failing. So that's what this particular line solves. All of that is in the commercial product. Down on the, looking through the list here, really just, kind of some minor fixes and the CVE there. We also did address some Ansible issues out there. So if you run into any Ansible issues, that is also open source, accessible, and you can check out if those fixes are relevant there. As usual, and this time we have quite a few. We like to call out our community contributors.
Yeah.
So thank you to these 5 people. A few of these are, Bruno and Rui do work for us here, but they don't work in in the product department or in the engineering department. They just help us out, right? They're great, neighbors, if you will, immediate neighbors, and we also appreciate the other contributions. And this can be just into docs, or they may be actual product fixes as well. So um, definitely appreciate all those, and we appreciate all of our staff contributors as well. If you want to see what else our staff gets up to, or what parts of the product they might be working on in the open source worlds, you can check those out.
Awesome.
So now that we got all the little stuff out of the way, let's jump up and let Jake take over and talk a little bit about this updated Kubernetes plugin suite.
Yeah, a lot of Kubernetes stuff here.
Jake, you want the release notes up, or you want to switch?
Yeah, you can leave that up. I think it's good to stick on these bullets here. So for those who've been familiar with the Rundeck and Runbook Automation product, we've had Kubernetes plugins for a while. They are open source plugins that that we try to provide our best effort support on. Those plugins are written in Python, and they are they're good for many use cases. But when you start to get to more production scale of having multiple Kubernetes clusters and multiple environments, and you don't want to also don't want to have to worry about this, the Python dependencies of running those plugins. That's where those plugins can really run short. And so what we did is we released a new suite of Kubernetes plugins that are bundled into the commercial offering and are built for more production type environments and more scale. And so that first bullet that you see there is one of the biggest changes here, where we've released multiple resource model plugins that will automatically retrieve your clusters from the cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and GCP, and add those clusters to the node inventory such that those clusters can be targeted as nodes in the product. And so what this allows you to do is carry out tasks using our new job step plugins across numerous clusters in a given operation. So whether that's retrieving information about what's actually running in production or in your different environments, or you want to roll out a new deployment, or do a rolling restart of some service across numerous clusters, you can now easily define a single job with very few job steps that then target these multiple clusters. And so that's where third bullet there on optimize for numerous clusters hits on that as well. The other major changes here are being able to run these plugins from our enterprise runner, and in conjunction with that, use the cloud providers as a means for authenticating against these clusters. And so what that means is that you could have a runner deployed into your cloud environment and have it be responsible for targeting these numerous clusters, and it will dynamically retrieve the kube config that it needs for each cluster by talking to the AWS API or Azure API or GCP APIs, and therefore you don't need to configure multiple kube configs on the runner and say this kube config is for this cluster and this one for that cluster. That cloud provider authentication, that second bullet, really saves a lot of configuration overhead without the need to actually deploy the runner into each cluster. However, if you want to go that route, that's what that fourth bullet is around, which is the native in-cluster support for the runner, which is to say, if you want to use a service account that's associated with a pod that's running in that cluster, you can do that. You can deploy a runner as a container, as a pod in your cluster, and then associate a service account with that pod that then designates what permissions the runner has, and therefore which actions these plugins are allowed to take within the clusters. So I'll pause there because that's a lot, but we've really listened to our customers and what they're trying to do in production environments and at scale, and try to address those needs with this new suite.
Yeah, this seems to add a lot of flexibility to however people are deciding to work on their clusters. So it's awesome.
I'm sure this will come up in the demo, but I want to break down a little bit of something that Jake mentioned earlier. With these 3 node sources, if you have even all 3, right, Kubernetes environments running in all 3, you'll be able to configure those, but still use one job and one set of Kubernetes steps across all of them. So if you have a mix of your nodes between EKS and AKS, you can have one job with one step if you want, and it will dynamically and auto-magically, in my opinion, figure out and talk to those without having like okay, I got to write my Azure job this way, and then I've got to write my AWS job this way. So we've been able to abstract that complexity away and just focus on, I need to do this Kubernetes task, and I need to do it on these Kubernetes resources that I defined separately.
And it should be mentioned too that the new job step plugins can work with non-cloud native Kubernetes clusters. You would just add your clusters as nodes to the node inventory and then specify the kube config, or again, use the pod service account auth for those quote unquote self-hosted or rolled your own type of clusters. So we do support clusters in the data center as well with these new plugins and the runner functionality. But what Forrest is calling out is that our customers, like many, are running their workloads across multiple environments, cloud, multiple cloud providers, and in the data center as well, and that we've tried to provide the right level of abstraction layers such that you don't have to differentiate between them.
Yeah, and I think that answers Tyler's questions in the comments there. I don't know if you caught that since you're sharing. Actually, oh wait, I'm still sharing. But yeah. I think that's what Jake just answered for you, Tyler. You can comment back and let us know if that answered it. But you would just add the nodes, manually to the node sources, and you can use the node wizard in the commercial product. You can use a few of these plugins are all in the commercial product. So,
yeah, you can, as Forrest said, you could, manually add these clusters, but you might have your data center clusters, they might be populated in your observability tool, and they might be populated in in a CMDB or somewhere that Runbook Automation can integrate with, and then dynamically pull those in as well. So you can kind of get still that benefit of like us dynamically discovering new clusters that are spun up or deprovisioned, and then target those, just like we have with EKS, AKS, and GKE.
Yeah, as a side note, a little bit off topic ish, but if you are pulling from some other source, say your observability list or a CMDB, and it doesn't necessarily have all of the attributes, but you still want that to happen dynamically, we have the node enhancer plugins that you can use to further add attributes right. to those nodes dynamically. You don't have to manage everything through point and click and type it in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Speaking of pointing and clicking and typing things in, we can jump into a demo where we're going to do exactly that, but merely for demonstration purposes.
Awesome.
So what I'll actually start with is showing these node source plugins right here. And I have configured 3 node source plugins, where there's an EC2 one up here. We're going to ignore that one for right now. I'm going to set that aside. But we have an Azure Kubernetes and an AWS Kubernetes, so EKS and AKS. And for the Azure Kubernetes, you can see that I've plugged in a credential set, but the client secret, which is the the sensitive attribute here, is stored in key storage. But if you think treat these as values that you don't want your users to see, you can again make sure that only privileged users within the platform have access to the node source list, and then these attributes will not be visible to them from the node inventory or from the job or job steps. With AWS, we've actually authenticated by using our native Runbook Automation to AWS account, cross-account authentication method. And so I've actually configured that at the project level. So if I go to edit configuration real quick, you'll see plugins. I've configured my AWS plugin at the project level, giving this project a specific cross-account IAM-based authentication with this external AWS account. And so what that allows me to do is set up multiple AWS plugins like my EC2 plugin and my Kubernetes plugins without having to type in those credentials, that IAM ARN multiple times. So now that these are added, what does this actually look like? We'll go into the node inventory, and we will filter on just the Kubernetes clusters. And what you can see here is, in fact, we've got multiple AWS EKS clusters and Azure Kubernetes clusters. And with each of these, as we pull them in, you can see we add some node attributes. And these node attributes are pulled from talking directly from the cloud provider. So you can see things like environment and service and the status, the API endpoint of this cluster, if there's a public one. And similarly for the Azure ones, we see like the resource group and the region. And so as new Kubernetes clusters are spun up in your cloud provider's environment, these will be dynamically added to the node inventory. And when they are deprovisioned, they will be automatically removed. So now that these are added, we can execute certain operations against them. So we'll start by looking at a simple job that uses these new job steps that we've been talking about. So when we go into the workflow, you can see I have a single step job here, which is just to list objects. And in this case, I can select the object type that I want to list out. And it's across a specific namespace or multiple namespaces, all namespaces in this case. And I can also choose the output format that I want. I'm going to use simple list for right now, but what you'll notice in this job step, which is very different than the original open source Kubernetes job steps we have, is that I don't have anything specifying authentication here. All of that is done by virtue of the fact that this is a node step that is targeting these nodes. And the authentication is now abstracted away from the job author. In this case, what we'll see is the authentication is actually happening from one of our runners that is talking to the cloud provider's APIs to dynamically get the kube config for each of these clusters. And so we'll go ahead and run this. So we'll actually run it across 4 nodes that are spanning the 2 cloud providers. And then we can open up one of these just to show what that looks like. All right, so we got pods in our ACES cluster. This one is in Azure, I believe. This other one is also in Azure. And then these last 2 are in AWS EKS. And again, we're looking at some pods from across all namespaces. So you see some very core pods. So that's a very basic example. A more realistic example, though, is actually deploying something to multiple clusters. And so here we have a job that is actually going to roll out a new deployment. And the way that this job works, and it's now a multi-step job, we have one job step to retrieve a deployment YAML from Git. And then we pass in that retrieved YAML as a data variable to our deployment step. And so in this case, we have a create object Kubernetes plugin. We're declaring a deployment as the object type. We're going to pass that in. You can see that you could hard code the YAML in here, which is nice for testing purposes. But as you might imagine, you're likely going to actually have your deployment YAML and service YAML, et cetera, stored in Git. And so let's go ahead and run this. And what you'll see with this job, you actually see that it's running across 2 clusters at a time. And so we're taking advantage of Runbook Automation's orchestration capabilities and being able to batch numerous clusters at a time in terms of rolling out this deployment. And so when we open these up, we can actually see the deployment YAML for this particular cluster and all of the specs. In this case, we're rolling out a very simple Nginx deployment. The YAML for it is over here, if you really want to see how simple and straightforward it is. We're defining just a single replica for that deployment. But what you just witnessed, right, is being able to roll out this deployment in batches of, in this case, 2, but it could have been 10 clusters at a time, spanning both AWS and Azure. So to Forrest's earlier point is you could have a very at scale hybrid or multi-cloud environment spanning AWS, Azure, GCP, and data center, but not need to rewrite a lot of these operations across multiple jobs. So that was a lot, but hopefully gets the points across and gets everyone excited about what we've been working on.
Yeah, Tyler had another question in the comments. Are you open to reviewing PRs that add plugins for other Kube providers? And the short answer is yes. As I mentioned earlier, these are part of the commercial product. So if you want to reach out to me, LinkedIn is fine. The email is forrest@pagerduty.com with 2 R's in Forrest. We can chat more about what that might look like. In particular, it would be additional node sources that would operate similar to this. We have some internal standards and guidance we can provide around writing additional plugins. But if you want to respond back in chat what you're looking for, what you're thinking, if there's other Kube providers that would be of interest, I'm curious which ones those would be.
Yeah, Tyler, if you're still listening, you want to share with us a little bit about your platforms or infrastructure of choice, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. The last thing I'll say on this note is these plugins, it was alluded to earlier, work really well in tandem with our enterprise runner. And if you've been on our recent release notes, we've made it so that the runners have a nice, elegant, dynamic relationship with the nodes in the node inventory. And so you can say this runner is responsible for my clusters in this region, and this runner is responsible for my clusters in that region. And so here we can see that the US East runner was automatically chosen for my ACES cluster. And all of these clusters are actually in US East. So it's fairly straightforward. But again, you're able to do that one-time configuration, that one-time setup, even for a fairly dynamic environment, which then makes the creation of these jobs much easier for your everyday job authors, where they don't have to worry about all of the connective tissue and networking. That can be done by the project admin and the team lead. And all they need to worry about as job authors is the workflow that they want to execute and the nodes that they want to target. In this case, the nodes being the Kubernetes clusters. And so you were able to see that as part of the job definition, that I just chose the nodes that I wanted to target and the workflow that I wanted to carry out here. So you can see those job steps here, and the nodes. In this case, I just hard coded the names of the nodes, but I could easily use a node filter in our node filter syntax to say, environment equals QA, or environment equals Azure and stage equals QA. And it would just dynamically populate those nodes here. So making it a lot easier for those that want to build automation to do so without needing to learn a bunch of new concepts.
Awesome.
So I think that tackles the.
Yeah. We filled out our time pretty well this time.
Yeah, we got lots of stuff to cover this time around. So it's great. Awesome. Is there anything you want to tease going into the new year? Things that you're working on? Oh, here we go. We've got a response from Tyler. We have a hosted cube provider we launched, so I was just asking to see how we could help. Yeah, and is any of the new cube stuff part of the community version?
The new cube stuff is not in the community version, but all of the previous stuff does still exist. As I said, Tyler, you're welcome to reach out to me. I can engage on a partnership or guide you on how you might build things around both products, and we're happy to help companies like yours with things like license, etc. So if you need to do some additional development, we do that. I wanted to respond to Mandy's question, and I had something in my head, and
what's coming in the new year?
Not stay inside the Santa hat. It flew out as I answered the other question.
Reindeer took it and off it went.
Things to tease coming up. We are working on some, I don't know how vague to be, some Azure functionality that is very similar to some AWS functionality we released not too long ago. I'd have to scan back through all the numbers there and see which one it was, but we are, I think I got the question recently in another forum of, are we going to continue to build out Azure and the other services similarly to what we've done with AWS? And the answer is yes. We're trying to do that. I also am picking at myself that I think we're going to also target some AWS S3 improvements. That is AWS, but our S3 plugins they operate very differently. I noticed, sort of realized this yesterday after we did all that great work on the AWS plugins. Our S3 ones operate totally differently. Like they rely on the AWS client, and I think we're going to try and beef those up a little bit. And then sorry, actually, I have one more thing that I'll share.
Awesome. We got time.
I think that we've talked about this before, but I want to just reiterate that we did start, I think, October-ish with the content library. So you can start at the pager.com/automation. And we've been continuing to try and fill this out, right? These are collections of different use cases that are highlighted in our, if you sign up for Cloud, there's a default project in there. It has a ton of jobs that Jake and I have written over time. And they're all falling into a variety of these different categories. But even more recently, we added some storage management, jobs into there. If you click through to these, they talk about a little bit about the high level of the what and the why. But as you dig a little bit deeper and you get back to our familiar docs site, you can get walkthroughs of how to use the jobs. What do the jobs do? And as you dig into the jobs, often we're also throwing in other little, tidbits or ways to use the product that are helpful. Like many of our automated diagnostics jobs will also capture how do you send data back to the PagerDuty, core platform or an incident there, and or get that processed by the auto digest that's part of automation actions. So, I guess I just wanted to recall out that keep an eye on this. We are continuing to add more and more tiles to various categories. There's some new categories coming up. There's one pretty interesting new category coming up that our solution consulting team brought to me. Not going to share that one yet, but I think that it's pretty cool.
Sweet.
So it's I guess I'll put it this way: it can save money.
Ooh, okay, all right.
So
very nice, very nice. All right, awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, I don't see anything else yet for the folks that are hanging out with us on LinkedIn or anything. So this has been great. A lot of great new stuff that we love to see, and hopefully it'll help all the folks out there that are dealing with all the fun that is Kubernetes. So yeah. Sweet.
All
right, guys. Thank you. We'll see you again for 5.9 whenever it's ready in the new year. And we'll wish everybody an uneventful holiday season. We'll see you again in January.
Yeah. I think the target date is early January, so we'll see you in the new year, maybe.
Sweet. All right, guys, take care.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. See you later.
Bye.